What schools never told you about the Atlantic slave trade? The Atlantic slave trade stands as one of the most significant and horrifying episodes in human history. For over 4 centuries, millions of Africans were forcibly taken from their homeland, transported across the treacherous Atlantic Ocean, and subjected to unimaginable suffering and dehumanization. While many historical accounts touch upon this abhorrent chapter, there are aspects and details that often go untold in school curricula. Origins and scale of the slave trade. The Atlantic slave trade originated in the 15th century as European powers sought labor for their burgeoning colonies in the New World. Portugal led the way with the exploration of West Africa, establishing a network of trading posts along the coast to capture and transport enslaved Africans. However, it was the transatlantic slave trade that emerged in the 16th century, involving numerous European nations, including Britain, France, Spain, and the Netherlands, which expanded the scale of this horrific enterprise. The Middle Passage. One of the most harrowing aspects of the Atlantic slave trade was the Middle Passage. This voyage across the Atlantic was the second leg of the triangular trade route, transporting enslaved Africans from Africa to the Americas. The conditions on board the slave ships were nightmarish, with captives packed tightly together, often in inhumane conditions, enduring physical and sexual abuse, disease, and starvation. Mortality rates were shockingly high, and countless lives were lost during this treacherous journey. African collaboration. While European nations played a significant role in perpetuating the slave trade, it is essential to acknowledge the involvement of some African kingdoms and tribes in facilitating the capture and sale of fellow Africans. Slavery already existed in Africa before European arrival, but it took on a new dimension with the transatlantic slave trade. Some African leaders saw an opportunity for economic gain or sought to strengthen their power by collaborating with European slavers. However, it is crucial to recognize that African collaboration was neither universal nor representative of the entire continent. Impact on Africa. The Atlantic slave trade had a devastating impact on Africa, affecting its demography, economy, and social fabric. Entire communities were uprooted, families torn apart, and vital human resources were drained from the continent. Wars were fueled as rival tribes sought captives to sell to European traders. The loss of millions of able-bodied individuals profoundly hindered Africa's development, impeding progress in various fields and perpetuating a cycle of poverty and underdevelopment that still affects the continent today. Economic impact on the Americas. The economies of the Americas, particularly in regions such as the Caribbean and the southern United States, were built on the backs of enslaved Africans. Plantations producing cash crops like sugar, tobacco, and cotton relied heavily on slave labor. The vast profits generated from the slave-based economy enabled Europe to experience significant economic growth during this period, while the Americas became highly dependent on the institution of slavery for their prosperity. Resistance and abolition. The resilience and resistance of enslaved Africans played a crucial role in the eventual abolition of the Atlantic slave trade. From small acts of rebellion to large-scale uprisings, enslaved individuals fought for their freedom and dignity. The abolitionist movement gained momentum in the late 18th century, driven by moral and humanitarian concerns, as well as the growing realization that slavery was fundamentally incompatible with the principles of liberty and equality. Legacies and contemporary impact. The legacies of the Atlantic slave trade persist in both Africa and the Americas. The trauma and social divisions caused by centuries of slavery continue to shape societies today. Racism, discrimination, and systemic inequalities can be traced back to this period. Recognizing and addressing these ongoing effects is essential for achieving social justice and equality in the present. African cultural erasure. The Atlantic slave trade not only resulted in the physical displacement of millions of Africans, but also led to the erasure and distortion of their cultural heritage. Enslaved Africans were forcibly separated from their traditions, languages, religions, and cultural practices. As a result, much of Africa's rich cultural legacy was lost or marginalized, making it crucial to recognize and celebrate the resilience and survival of African cultural expressions in the face of such immense adversity. Longevity and global reach. The Atlantic slave trade lasted for over 4 centuries, from the 15th to the 19th century, making it one of the longest and most far-reaching systems of human enslavement in history. Its impact extended not only to the Americas but also to Europe, Africa, and other parts of the world. The trade formed complex networks of commerce, finance, and power that transcended national boundaries, shaping global economic systems and geopolitical dynamics. The role of religion. Religion played a significant role in the Atlantic slave trade, both as a tool of control and resistance. Enslaved Africans were often forced to convert to Christianity and had their indigenous spiritual practices suppressed. However, they also managed to preserve and adapt their traditional beliefs by blending them with elements of Christianity, giving rise to syncretic religions such as Vodou, Santeria, and Candomblé. These syncretic faiths became potent symbols of resistance and cultural autonomy. Gendered experience of enslavement. The experiences of enslaved men and women differed significantly during the Atlantic slave trade. Women faced unique challenges, including sexual exploitation and reproductive coercion. Many women were subjected to sexual violence by slave owners, resulting in a painful legacy of racial mixing and the creation of diverse communities of mixed-race individuals in the Americas. Recognizing the gender dynamics of slavery is essential for understanding the full extent of its impact on individuals and communities. Abolition and resistance movements. Abolitionist movements and resistance efforts against slavery emerged both within the enslaved communities and among sympathetic individuals in groups in Europe and the Americas. The voices of prominent abolitionists like Olaudah Equiano, Harriet Tubman, and Frederick Douglass played a crucial role in raising awareness and galvanizing public opinion against the slave trade. The struggles and sacrifices of these abolitionists and the resilient resistance of enslaved individuals themselves paved the way for the eventual abolition of the transatlantic slave trade. Reparations and restorative justice. The issue of reparations for the Atlantic slave trade and its enduring legacies remains a topic of debate and discussion. Many argue that acknowledging the historical injustices and implementing restorative measures is essential for addressing the ongoing socio-economic disparities and systemic racism faced by descendants of enslaved Africans. Long-term impact on Africa. The Atlantic slave trade had profound and long-lasting consequences for Africa. The trade disrupted African societies and economies, as millions of individuals were forcibly taken away from their communities. The loss of a significant portion of the population had far-reaching effects on the social, cultural, and economic fabric of the continent. While schools often provide a basic understanding of the Atlantic slave trade, there are aspects that frequently go unexplored. This article aimed to shed light on some of the lesser-known details, highlighting the immense scale of suffering and the enduring impact of this tragic chapter in human history. By acknowledging the atrocities committed during the Atlantic slave trade and understanding its far-reaching consequences, we can strive to build a more inclusive and just world for all. So guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. For more interesting content, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more awesome content. Have a nice day, and I will see you in the next video.